The jungle of Varric 7 was alive with sound. In the dim twilight, strange creatures hissed and growled from the tangled undergrowth. Thick vines hung like nooses from towering trees, their leaves slick with moisture. The air was dense, humid, perfect. Conditions for a hunt. Drakzir crouched on a thick branch, scanning the clearing below with cold, calculating eyes. His Zelkorian blood burned with anticipation. He was a predator, the finest his clan had ever produced. He had hunted across 100 worlds, tracking prey from the frozen wastes of Karanis to the scorching dunes of Ziathra Prime. But tonight was different. Tonight the hunt felt wrong. His target was human, not just any human, an outcast warrior, one spoken of in hushed tones. The client who had hired him had been clear: eliminate the target at all costs. Do not underestimate them. Drakzir had laughed at that. He had faced humans before. They were tough, certainly, far stronger and more resourceful than their frail frame suggested, but they were still prey. He had expected this hunt to be like all the others, a game of patience, a swift, decisive kill. Yet now, staring at the figure in the clearing, unease crept into his mind. The human stood still, motionless in the center of the jungle floor. He was unarmed, no rifle, no blade, no armor. He wore only a tattered cloak, hood drawn low over his face. Rain dripped from the fabric, but he did not react. He just waited. Drakzir's mandibles twitched. Something about this was wrong. No. Prey should be this calm. No prey should wait for the hunter. Still, he was Zelkorian. The hunt must continue. With practiced ease, he reached for his plasma caster, the weapon humming to life on his shoulder. The human had no idea he was there. One clean shot, and the contract would be fulfilled. He lined up the shot, his claws tensed. Then the human spoke. "You should leave while you still can." Drakzir froze. The human's voice was quiet, almost calm. He did not turn, did not even lift his head, but somehow he knew. Drakzir snarled. It was a trick, some foolish attempt to intimidate him. It wouldn't work. He squeezed the trigger. A flash of blue light erupted in the darkness. In an instant, the air shimmered with energy. The human's arm moved, faster than thought, faster than the eye could follow. A glowing blade snapped into existence, and with a single motion, it deflected the plasma bolt. The shot veered wildly into the trees, striking a thick trunk and sending embers into the air. Drakzir's eyes widened. A Jedi. A deep, primal fear gripped his chest. He had heard the stories. Even in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, warriors spoke of them in whispers. Humans were already dangerous. A human with the Force. He had been hunting the wrong prey. For the first time in years, Drakzir hesitated. The Jedi finally turned, tilting his head just enough for his hood to slip back, slightly, revealing a scarred face and calm, piercing eyes. He was not afraid. Drakzir's mandibles clenched. He had never backed down from a hunt, and he would not start now. Jedi or not, the human would fall. He vanished into the trees. His cloaking device shimmered, bending light around his form. Within seconds, he was a ghost, completely invisible. This was how he had bested entire battalions before, how he had hunted creatures larger, stronger, and faster than himself. But as he crept forward, something unsettled him. The Jedi did not move, did not look around, did not even bother to search for him. He just stood there, blade humming, waiting. Drakzir leaped from his perch, wrist blades extending with a deadly hiss. He would strike from behind, fast and lethal. The Jedi would never see him. The Jedi turned, mid-air. Drakzir had not made a single sound, but the Jedi knew. There was a blur of motion, a sudden crack of displaced air, and then pain. Drakzir hit the ground hard, rolling through the mud. Sparks flew from his armor where the Jedi's blade had clipped him, burning through the plating like it was paper. He roared, scrambling to his feet, heart pounding. That was impossible. The Jedi hadn't seen him, hadn't heard him. And yet, he had reacted perfectly. The human stood where he had before, still calm, still watching. "You don't have to do this." The Jedi's voice was level, almost sympathetic. Drakzir bared his fangs. He was a hunter, not some weakling who needed mercy. With a furious growl, he slammed a control on his gauntlet, activating every weapon at his disposal. Plasma darts whirred into place, blades extended. He would not hold back. This time the Jedi raised his weapon. The glowing blade flared, illuminating the jungle. "Then let's finish this." The hunt was over. The battle had begun. The jungle was no longer a hunting ground. It was a battlefield. Drakzir's blood pounded in his ears. His cloaking device flickered erratically, struggling to keep up with the damage from the Jedi's blade. His mandibles clenched in frustration. This wasn't how the hunt was supposed to go. The human should have been dead by now. Instead, he stood in the clearing, lightsaber humming, his stance unshaken. Drakzir fired first. A rapid burst of plasma darts shrieked through the air, streaking toward the Jedi like violet comets. The human moved, not with panic, but with purpose. One step, a tilt of his head, then motion like liquid fire. The glowing blade cut through the air, intercepting every shot with effortless precision. Not a single bolt reached him. Drakzir's mind reeled. His prey had just deflected plasma at point-blank range without flinching. Then, before he could react, the Jedi attacked. The blue blade flashed, a single stroke cutting through the night like lightning. Drakzir barely dodged, twisting away as the energy sword sliced through the trunk behind him, leaving a molten gash in the wood. The heat was immense, too close. His instincts screamed at him. This was no ordinary fight. This was survival. Drakzir activated his gauntlet, sending out a sonic pulse designed to rupture eardrums and disrupt equilibrium. It had brought down warlords. It had crippled beasts twice his size. The Jedi didn't even flinch. Instead, he took a step forward, calm, measured. The realization hit Drakzir like a hammer. The Force was shielding him. A tremor of fear crept into his mind. He had hunted humans before, but never like this. Never one who felt him coming. He needed to adapt fast. With a flick of his wrist, he launched a plasma net from his gauntlet. The energy lattice expanded in midair, spreading wide in an attempt to snare the Jedi. No creature had ever escaped it. The Jedi merely raised a hand. Drakzir felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air, as if gravity itself had bent to the human's will. The net stopped mid-flight, frozen in place. Then with a flick of the Jedi's fingers, it whipped around and hurtled back, straight at Drakzir. He barely managed to roll away before the net struck a tree behind him, wrapping around its trunk and hissing with crackling energy. That should have been impossible. Drakzir's breath came fast. His claws flexed. This was not a hunt. This was a nightmare. The Jedi closed the distance, one step, another. Each movement was controlled. No wasted effort, no hesitation. Drakzir roared in frustration, lunging with his wrist blades. A deadly slash aimed for the human's throat. A killing blow. The Jedi wasn't there. Drakzir's blade met nothing but air. The human had sidestepped at the last moment, weaving away with almost casual grace. Then, before Drakzir could recover, a shockwave slammed into him. The Jedi had simply raised his palm, and an unseen force hurled Drakzir backward. He crashed through the underbrush, skidding across the damp earth, his armor sparking as it scraped against stone. His mind reeled. How? The Jedi finally spoke. "You're outmatched," Drakzir growled, dragging himself to his feet. His body ached. His vision blurred for half a second, but his warrior's pride burned hotter than ever. He would not run, not from prey, not even from A Jedi. With a guttural snarl, he activated his wrist-mounted blade launcher, firing twin projectiles at blinding speed. At this range, they were unavoidable. The Jedi didn't dodge. He caught them. The moment the blades reached him, his hand closed around them mid-air, as if time itself had stopped. Draxir's heart stopped. "It's over," the Jedi said. Then he moved, a single step forward. A flick of his wrist, the blades spun in the air and shot back, twice as fast. Draxir threw himself aside, but he wasn't fast enough. One of the blades sliced through his shoulder armor, searing into his flesh. Pain lanced through him. His blood dripped onto the jungle floor, steaming in the humid air. For the first time in his life, he felt like prey, and the Jedi knew it. The warrior inside him refused to accept it. With a defiant roar, he raised his plasma caster for one last, desperate strike. He would not fall without a fight. But the Jedi was already closing the distance. Draxir barely had time to blink before the lightsaber was at his throat. A fraction of an inch separated him from death. Silence filled the jungle. The hum of the glowing blade was the only sound. Draxir's breathing was ragged. His claws trembled. He had never been bested like this before. The Jedi tilted his head slightly, eyes steady, calm, unshaken. Yield. Draxir snarled, but deep down he knew the truth. He had lost. The predator had become the prey. Slowly, painfully, he dropped his weapon. The Jedi exhaled, lowering his saber. Good choice. The hunt was over. But the real battle had just begun. The jungle was never silent for long. As the hum of the Jedi's lightsaber faded, the shadows stirred. Draxir's wounds burned, his pride even more so. He had never surrendered before, but the Jedi had bested him, not just in skill, but in power. And yet, something felt wrong. The Jedi's stance shifted, his expression tightening. He was no longer focused on Draxir. His gaze was on the trees. Draxir's mandibles clicked. His instincts prickled. They were being watched. Then the jungle came alive. A low, guttural growl echoed through the canopy. It was followed by another, then another. The Jedi's head tilted. His fingers tightened around his saber hilt. "What are they?" he asked. Draxir wiped the blood from his mandibles. Now he was the one smirking. "You thought I was the only predator here?" Branches cracked. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness. Then, with a deafening screech, the jungle attacked. A Nathrex, a six-limbed apex predator with chitinous armor and razor-sharp mandibles, lunged. From the undergrowth, the Jedi reacted instantly. His blade snapped to life, arcing through the air. The Nathrex let out a screech as the lightsaber cleaved through its front limb, molten ichor spraying across the dirt. But it wasn't alone. 3 more burst from the foliage, their movements fluid and relentless. Draxir didn't hesitate. His honor could wait, his survival could not. He rolled away as a second Nathrex struck, its claws slashing through the space where he had just stood. With a flick of his gauntlet, he activated his retractable spear, spinning it into a defensive stance. The Jedi moved beside him, back to back, their fight momentarily aligned. "Truce?" the human asked. Draxir clicked his mandibles. For now, then the battle began. The Jedi moved like a phantom, his lightsaber a blur of blue light, cutting through the beasts with terrifying precision. He dodged, twisted, and struck, every motion effortless, as if the jungle itself bent to his will. Draxir fought differently, brutal, calculated, efficient. His spear found weak points between chitinous plates, driving deep and twisting. His gauntlet unleashed plasma bursts, searing flesh and forcing the creatures back, but the jungle would not be denied. Vines slithered down from the canopy, wrapping around their limbs. The trees shifted, as if the very forest had turned against them. The Jedi closed his eyes. A deep breath, a raised hand, then A shockwave. The vines snapped apart, their tendrils thrown backward as if repelled by an invisible force. Dragzir barely had time to process it before another Nathrex lunged at him, mandibles wide, fangs dripping venom. This time. He didn't dodge. He met the beast head-on, driving his spear through its throat and twisting. The Nathrex let out a strangled screech before collapsing, its lifeless body thudding against the ground. The last of the creatures hesitated. Then, sensing the tide had turned, they vanished into the shadows, their glowing eyes disappearing one by one. The jungle fell silent again. Dragzir breathed heavily, his body aching, his blood dripping onto the dirt. The Jedi extinguished his saber. "That was unexpected," the human muttered. Dragzir chuckled darkly. He had fought many things, but a Jedi and the jungle at the same time. That was new, and it wasn't over yet. The jungle had tested them. But something far worse was coming. Something neither of them were ready for. Dragzir's breath came heavy. The jungle was silent once more, but he knew better. Predators did not simply vanish, they waited. The Jedi stood beside him, lightsaber unlit, but ready. His face was calm, but Dragzir could see it. He felt it too. Something else was out there. Something worse. The jungle had tested them. Now it was choosing a victor. A deep rumbling vibrated through the ground. Dragzir tensed. "That's not the Nathrex," the Jedi murmured. No, it wasn't. A shadow moved beyond the trees, massive and deliberate. The apex predator of this world had arrived. The Jarvek stepped into view, a towering beast 6 meters tall, its body layered in obsidian-like plating, with 6 powerful limbs that could tear through steel. Its eyes glowed like dying embers, and its gaping maw dripped with venom. Dragzir had faced these before. Alone he had barely survived, even armed, but now he was wounded. Low on energy, his spear was damaged and his gauntlet nearly spent. For the first time in years, a thought crept into his mind. I might not walk away from this. The Jedi moved first. His lightsaber snapped to life, its blue glow casting long shadows across the jungle floor. "Stay behind me," Dragzir snarled. "I do not hide behind prey." The Jarvek charged. The Jedi leaped, his movements swift, precise, inhuman. His saber carved through the air, striking true, but the beast's armor was thick. The blade burned into its hide, yet it did not falter. Instead, it swung one massive claw. The Jedi barely dodged, flipping backward as the strike tore a tree in. If Dragzir saw his opening, with a roar he lunged, plasma spear in hand. He drove the weapon toward the beast's exposed underbelly. It was ready, faster than something that size had any right to be. The Jarvek twisted, one of its lower limbs slamming into Dragzir's chest. He flew back, crashing into the mud, pain flaring through his ribs. The beast turned on him, sensing weakness, but the Jedi was already moving. With a flick of his wrist, the lightsaber spun through the air, severing 2 of the creature's secondary limbs before snapping back into his hand. The Jarvek roared, staggering, but still very much alive. Dragzir forced himself up. His pride burned hotter than his wounds. This was his fight, not the Jedi's. His kind did not retreat, they did not fall. If he was to die, he would die on his feet. He gritted his mandibles and charged again. This time, he did not aim for a single strike. He was relentless. A flurry of attacks, his spear flashing in deadly arcs, striking at joints, weak points, eyes. The Jedi moved with him, a perfect rhythm, striking where Dragzir could not. For the first time, the Jarvek faltered. It reared back, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Now was the moment. Dragzir lunged forward, roaring, driving his spear deep into the beast's throat. The Jedi followed, his lightsaber plunging into its chest, straight into the heart. The Jarvek convulsed. Then, with a final rattling breath, it collapsed. The jungle fell silent. Dragzir staggered back, breathing heavily. His hands were soaked in ichor. He turned to the Jedi. For the first time, he saw something different in the human's eyes. Respect. The Jedi inclined his head. That was impressive. Drakzir let out a low, satisfied growl. You are not prey. Human. Not today. The hunt was over. But the war. That was only beginning. The jungle was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. The Jarvek lay dead, its massive form motionless, its thick blood soaking into the earth. Drakzir stood over it, breathing hard, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. He had fought. He had won. But as he turned to the Jedi, something unsettled him. The human was not celebrating. Instead, he stood still, calm, his gaze fixed on the fallen beast. You do not revel in victory? Drakzir asked, tilting his head. The Jedi exhaled. Slowly, victory means nothing if the battle was unnecessary. Drakzir frowned. Unnecessary? The words did not fit in his mind. To fight was to prove worth. To survive was to be strong. This hunt was a test of power, he said, stepping forward. I proved myself. You proved yourself. The beast proved itself. The Jedi turned to him, his blue eyes steady. The beast is dead. We are alive. But what did it prove? Drakzir stiffened. That I am the stronger predator. The Jedi shook his head. Strength is not just in battle. It's in knowing when not to fight. Drakzir huffed, his mandibles twitching. Spoken like prey. He expected anger. He expected challenge. But the Jedi only smiled, a small, knowing smile. And yet, the human said, you fought beside me. Drakzir paused. His kind did not fight with others. They fought against them. Yet in that moment, against the Jarvek, he had fought as one, and it had worked. The realization was uncomfortable. He looked down at his bloodied hands, then back at the human. Your kind fights differently, he admitted. The Jedi nodded. We fight for something greater than ourselves. Drakzir's eyes narrowed. Honor? Glory? No. The Jedi's voice was firm. For those who cannot fight for themselves. Drakzir had heard many warriors speak of strength, of conquest, of battle, but this was new. A warrior who fought not for power but for others. Was such a thing possible? The idea gnawed at him, challenging everything he had ever known. He studied the Jedi, searching for weakness. He found none, only conviction. Drakzir exhaled slowly. His pride still burned, but something else had taken root. Curiosity. Perhaps. Human, he said at last. There is more to war than I thought. The Jedi smiled. Perhaps there is more to you than just a warrior. Drakzir did not respond. For the first time in his life, he did not have an answer. The jungle watched in silence. Two warriors stood, once enemies, now something else. The hunt had ended. The understanding had begun. The jungle had grown still. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The corpse of the Jarvek lay where it had fallen, its massive form a testament to the battle fought here. Drakzir stood over it, his mind churning. The hunt was over. He had his victory, and yet something felt unfinished. He turned to the human. The Jedi watched him calm as ever, his hands resting at his sides. No blade drawn, no challenge issued. What now, warrior? Drakzir asked, his mandibles clicking. The Jedi studied him, then gestured to the jungle around them. That is your choice to make. Drakzir frowned. The choice was obvious. He would take the Jarvek's skull, return to his clan, and be celebrated for his victory. Honor, recognition, strength. That was the way of the hunt. But you fight for others, he said slowly, yet you do not demand conquest. You do not claim this kill as yours. The Jedi shook his head. I did not fight for a trophy. I fought to survive and to protect you as you protected me. Drakzir's mandibles tightened. That word again. Protect. He had never fought to protect anyone before. only to prove himself. And yet when the Jarvek struck, his instincts had not been to flee, not to leave the Jedi to his fate. He had fought beside him, not for dominance, but for survival, for something more. Drak-Zir looked down at his bloodied claws, then at the fallen beast. "My people believe the hunt is the way of the strong," he murmured. "Strength is more than the hunt," the Jedi replied. "It is knowing when to walk away from one." Drak-Zir's gaze snapped up. "You would have me abandon this kill?" "No," the Jedi said simply. "I would have you decide what this hunt meant to you." Drak-Zir's claws twitched. If he took the skull, he would return home a champion. If he left it, what then? Would he be seen as weak? Would he see himself as weak? His kind had always believed that strength came from victory, that the only way to prove oneself was through domination. But here, on this battlefield, no one had truly won. The Jarvek was dead. And yet, for the first time, Drak-Zir was questioning whether victory was enough. The Jedi watched him, patient. No orders, no demands, just a choice. Drak-Zir let out a slow breath. Then he turned away from the body. His steps were heavy at first, his instincts screaming at him to go back, to claim what was his. But the further he walked, the quieter that voice became. By the time he reached the edge of the clearing, it was gone. The Jedi followed beside him, saying nothing. Drak-Zir glanced at him. "You knew I would not take the skull." The human only smiled. "I knew you would choose for yourself." Drak-Zir let that sink in. For the first time in his life, his worth had not been measured in a kill, and yet he did not feel weak. He felt free. As the jungle swallowed them once more, Drak-Zir realized something. This was not the end of his hunt, it was only the beginning. The jungle whispered its secrets too. The wind, soft rustling leaves, distant calls of unseen creatures, the scent of damp earth and blood fading with each step. Drak-Zir walked in silence, the human at his side. The weight of the hunt no longer pressed upon his shoulders. He had made his choice. He had left the kill behind, and yet his spirit felt heavier than ever. "My people will not understand," he murmured. The Jedi glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps not," he said. "But does that matter?" Drak-Zir's mandibles clicked in thought. It should matter. His clan's respect meant everything, but for the first time he questioned whether their definition of strength was the only one that existed. The Jarvek had been the ultimate prey. He had bested it in combat, stood victorious over its corpse. By all rights, he should have taken its skull as proof of his power, and yet he had walked away. Not in defeat, not in fear, but in understanding. Strength was more than a trophy. Perhaps the true measure of a hunter was knowing when to stop hunting. The thought unsettled him. It did not fit within the traditions he had been raised to follow, and yet it felt right in a way he could not explain. The Jedi finally spoke. His voice, calm but firm. The greatest warriors are not remembered for the battles they fought, but for what they stood for. Drak-Zir's claws twitched. "You believe I will be remembered." The Jedi's lips curled in a small smile. "I believe legends are not born from victories alone." Drak-Zir considered that. Among his people, only the strongest became legends. Those who conquered, who brought back trophies from the most dangerous beasts. But here, standing at the edge of the jungle, he wondered, was there another way? Would the story of this hunt be remembered not for the kill, but for the choice he had made? Would his people scoff at him, or would they listen? Would they begin to understand what he had only just begun to grasp? Drak-Zir let out a slow, steady breath. "If I return to my people, they will expect a trophy, a sign of my strength. Then give them one." The Jedi reached into his belt and pulled something. Free, a simple blade, old and worn, yet well cared for. He flipped it in his palm and held it out. Take this. Draxir frowned, looking at the small weapon. This is not a hunter's prize. No, the Jedi agreed. It is a warrior's token. Draxir hesitated, then reached out, grasping the hilt. The metal was cool against his skin, but as he held it, it felt heavier than any trophy he had ever claimed. "What is its meaning?" he asked. The Jedi smiled. "It is proof that you walked away from a hunt and became something greater." Draxir tightened his grip. He did not yet know what that meant, but he would. One day, his people would understand. One day, his name would not be spoken as a warrior who conquered, but as a warrior who chose. As the jungle faded behind them and the stars stretched before them, Draxir knew one thing for certain. Legends were not born from the trophies left behind. They were born from the choices that defined them, and he had made his choice.